Hello again. So this is again a quick summary for the gonadal hormone, and for the both lecture part 1 and 2 I'm just gonna create in a single video. Um, so we have seen this picture so many times, and make sure that we are following this what we have covered so far. And in this lecture what we did, basically we looked at the gonadal hormones. So we basically looked at these guys. Testosterone, estrogens, and progesterone, and these are released from gonads. The reason I'm showing this diagram or figure is basically, if you would remember, I showed a video during the first lecture from graduates, and then they were asked, can you light a bulb with the wire and battery? And that was, such a basic fundamental principle behind all the electronics engineering or whatever. So that's what. So make sure that you understand this basic thing. Like, so for example, if there's a question saying, which of the following is a gonadal hormone, and they're like estrogen, adrenocorticosteroid, and then you have oxytocin, ADH, and everybody must answer it correctly. Like estrogen is the correct option there. So that's the reason I'm showing this one. So these are the fundamental things. I mean, these are just the basic things. I mean, you should know that. And again, we have seen this so many times now, is that which of the hypothalamic hormones is involved in this axis. It's called as the gonadotropin releasing hormone, because it basically triggers anterior pituitary release this FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, when telling these gonads or gamete producing organs like testes and ovaries to release these gonadal hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. So make sure that you remember that, understand that. And we have seen this chart so many times, and I think so. There was another video, I think so, in the lecture. I would highly recommend watching that just to understand this. But make sure that you understand what FSH is doing, what estrogen was doing, estrogen surge, what LH surge is doing, ovulation, triggering ovulation, what progesterone surge is doing. So just to give you a very quick overview, we saw this cartoon. This is hypothalamus, this is pituitary, and this is ovary. So hypothalamus does what? It basically releases this GnRH, which tells anterior pituitary release FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. You see this follicle stimulating hormone? So what this does, basically, it stimulates this, causes the follicular development, and this triggers estrogen release, which further triggers luteinizing hormone release, and the luteinizing hormone, it triggers the progesterone. So so you see that this nice interplay between these hormones from hypothalamus, anterior pituitary, and ovary. And eventually, if you see, this is the cycle from 0 to 28 menstrual cycle, and then what estrogen is doing, this is during this phase, and progesterone is during this phase. So you see that the lining is thickening. So basically, it is preparing for possible pregnancy. So let's say if pregnancy occurs, so you definitely don't want to start. You don't want this cycle to go over again. So then, in that case, the heightened level of the estrogens, progesterone, and they're going to tell hypothalamus to say, look, we have a pregnancy here. We want to keep this hormones high. So what these guys are doing, they're putting a negative feedback check there. So now hypothalamus, GnRH, FSH, LH release is going to be stopped. So this occurs when pregnancy occurs. So in pregnancy, which hormones are higher? Estrogens and progesterone right here. So they're higher here, and then they negatively stop the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary. So make sure that you know which hormone is doing what, and why this is stopping. It's a negative feedback mechanism. So let's say if the pregnancy does not occur, so what happens then? So if pregnancy does not occur, all hormones levels go down, and then the cycle starts again. You see that? It goes back to 0 again. All the hormones levels fall, and then they start again. So this cycle continues. So I think so. I had that question in Kahoot 2. in pregnancy, you see reduction in progesterone and estrogen level at the end of menstrual cycle. Well, that's incorrect, because if they go down, I mean, then basically the shedding process is going to start over again. So make sure that you understand which hormone is doing what and what is the interplay, and in pregnancy what happens. Okay, so now we know all these hormones, what they do in terms of menstrual cycle, and possible role in pregnancy. Make sure that you know what ovarian hormones are. So ovary is the primary source of gonadal hormone in women, and then what triggers that? Pulsatile pituitary gonadotropin secretion. That's critical for it's absolutely necessary for the onset of puberty. And then what happens down the road, the ovary fails to respond to this gonadotropin as with the advancement of age, and then the menstrual cycle basically stops. That's when the menopause is there. So it's not based on egg or how many eggs, or it's basically with the advancement of age, this ovary is not responding to gonadotropins secreted by the pituitary. So basically, it's not triggering all those maturation of follicles or release of ovum, basically. So that's basically you see in menopause. And these are the ovarian hormones, estrogens and progesterone. So make sure that you remember all these drugs' names. I mean, I really can't help. Make sure that you remember all these drugs' names. I mean, that's the key. And then let's talk about the first estrogens. So estrogens are basically, when we talk estrogen, the major primary estrogen is estradiol, or E2. It's called estradiol alpha 17 beta. This is the major estrogen in women. There are other estrogens and estroiols, but estradiol is the major secretory product of ovary. So if you have a question, which of the following is major secretory, major estrogen? Well, the answer is estradiol. And so this is natural. So we do have a lot of synthetic stuff, synthetic estrogens too, or estrogenic estrogen like drugs or chemicals. And don't worry about the structures, but just make sure that you know the names. These names are there right here. So if you know the names of the drug, which one is progesterone, which is estrogen, I think so that's fine. Okay, and then again, so this is another statement, but estrone and estriols have low affinity for estrogen receptor. That is the reason, one of the reasons, I mean, these are not major, because estradiol is the major one. How the estrogen is working, basically the estrogen receptor are where? In nucleus. So what happens, basically, make sure that you understand and remember this, what is happening following the binding of estrogens to the estrogen receptors. So what the first step? Binding of this estrogen or hormone to this estrogen receptor. It's gonna dimerize this receptor. So this dimerization, and then this steroid and receptor dimer complex, it binds or interacts with the regulatory DNA sequence. So this bind to DNA binding or DNA sequence, and then it basically triggers gene transcription. All you have to understand and remember is that the receptor for estrogens are in nucleus, and it induces dimerization of the receptor, estrogen receptor, and triggers gene transcription. And this line is very important, because we will have to see this line again in SCRM mechanism of action. So we'll discuss this right there. Make sure that you understand and remember the physiological effects of estrogen. These are self-explanatory. I mean, you should know that. So if there's a question, the estrogen effects. Which of the following is not an effect of estrogen? You say that it stimulates maturation of uterus, it stimulates development of breast, it helps to preserve bone, and if let's say it basically decreases maturation of ovaries, well, that's not true, but this is like obvious, right? So make sure that you know what it does, which organs. And these are pretty much full sentences, so make sure that you remember that. So So what are the clinical indication for this? Primary hypogonadism, as in hormone replacement therapy. So in case a patient is has deficiency of estrogen, can be used in hormone replacement therapy. Or in case of post-menopausal women, because we saw that when there is menopause, during menopause the estrogen level really fall, and then what happens, it raises the plasma cholesterol and LDL concentration, and then estrogen replacement therapy could be beneficial in some of the lipid and lipoprotein, but we don't know whether it is clinically has translation value in terms of saving people from myocardial infarction or a stroke. But the bottom line is that if these are the good effects, so down the road when during the following menopause, if you don't have estrogen, basically you will have all these opposite effects, right? You don't have, especially the bone density is going to be impacted. The heart and liver will somehow having beneficial effects. So if the estrogen is not there, it's going to be a problem there. So that's the reason we have these drugs could be used for hormonal therapy in case of postmenopausal women. But before we go that direction, let's talk about where. So let's say if you have a case of this after menopause, and you want to initiate this estrogen therapy there. So there are some good effects of that, but there are also bad effects because you are exogenously supplying estrogen. So what are the good effects? Well, it will be good for bones. It will be lowering LDL, raising HDL, which is good cholesterol. It might reduce the symptoms of menopause, but it will increase chances of breast cancer, uterine cancer, and blood clot risk. Why? Because it was actually stimulating. You see that? It's stimulating. So it's saying that although it's like good effects too, but you have bad effects. So it's kind of a two-edged sword. So that's the reason the current guidelines does not recommend routine hormone therapy for postmenopausal women. However, if in case of women has premature menopause, yes, they should receive this treatment. And let's say in case if there's a need of that, you can have like transdermal or vaginal administration, so that it can bypass the hepatic portal circulation, so you can avoid the negative CV effects. So this must be considered. So let's say if there's a question, what are the possible risks for risk of hormone replacement therapy with estrogen during menopause, and there are a bunch of options, and so these are the possible risks basically involved in hormone replacement therapy for postmenopausal women. So there are certain adverse effects too, so uterine bleeding, and that this could be minimized by using small doses. So make sure that you remember this, what are the adverse effects, how to minimize that. So certain cases of cancer, and then this is again important. You see that there are certain critical important piece of information that you must know that. So how do you minimize this in case if you have to give it? So you give in small doses. So in case if the patient has cancer, so adverse it can cause cancer because it can increase risk of cancer. But with short-term estrogen therapy, the incidence of breast cancer has there's no documented evidence, or there's no adverse effect of short-term therapy. But if you increase, well, there's a chance. So see that short-term, in small doses, they could be beneficial, but as you go higher doses, you see all these symptoms. And what are contraindication? Well, then if the patient have already all these complications, you definitely don't give them. So now we have progesterone. So which one is the natural progesterone? Progesterone is the natural one in humans, and where it's synthesized: ovary, testes, adrenal cortex, and from cholesterol this is synthesized. Large amount synthesized in placenta during pregnancy, and it also serves as a precursor for estrogen, androgen, and other corticosteroids. The reason it's important because we saw this chart in corticosteroids, and So where is progesterone here? So here's the progesterone. So you see that. So this is a very important molecule, because you see that it is not only responsible for these pathways stimulation. What is being synthesized? It's synthesized from cholesterol, and you must know where it can be synthesized: ovary, testes, adrenal cortex, and the placenta during pregnancy. Okay, so this is like the natural. Then we have synthetic ones. So these are synthetic. Make sure that you remember all these names. You don't need to memorize the formulation there, but you must know the names of these drugs. And so the mechanism of action is basically so it basically binds to the receptors, which is progesterone receptor, which are in nucleus and cytoplasm, and it activates gene transcription. I mean, there's no need to go in complicated details for that. The bottom line is that you need to know which receptor it is binding to, where the receptors are located, and what is the end outcome. So receptor for progesterone are located in nucleus and cytoplasm, and it activates gene transcription. So if you see a question, the progesterone binds to G protein coupled receptors and then activate or triggers potassium influx. Well, it just doesn't make any sense because it activates gene transcription. Or let's say if you or it binds to retinoid receptor, it really doesn't matter. It's a progesterone receptor. If you see it binds to sulfurase receptors, which is G protein coupled receptor, that's not true, because the receptors are in nucleus and cytoplasm. So you see that no matter how the question is framed, you just can answer it. What are the physiological effects? I think so. These are self-explanatory. So basically, what is progesterone doing? It was high when the pregnancy occurs. So what it does, basically, it induces maturation and secondary changes in the endometrium that is required for pregnancy. And these are all possible effects that could be beneficial in pregnancy. So make sure that you understand that what it does. Like for example, it stimulates lipoprotein lipase activity, and then it increases fat deposition and promote glycogen storage, increase body temperature, decrease sodium reabsorption in the kidney because of competition with aldosterone. So I mean, these are like full sentences, so make sure that you remember this, understand this. Okay, what are the clinical uses? So it could be used as a hormone replacement therapy. Remember what progesterone was doing? It was helping to, this is what it was doing. It was inducing the maturation and secretory changes in endometrium. So it was basically preparing the endometrium for possible pregnancy. So in case a patient has deficiency, I mean, this can be used to facilitate the conceiving process. And then probably this is most widely used, the hormonal contraception in high doses for a long period of time. But it has a rapid metabolism, which results in low viability. So that's the reason the synthetic progesterones are used a lot in contraception. So in case if the large doses of these are used for certain cases, like the patient has abnormal menstrual cycle or endometriosis, basically the inflammation in the endometrium. So if you so these agents are given in very large dose, like 150 milligrams for 9 days. Make sure that the patient is what is the contraindication, and for this one is that patient should not be planning for pregnancy in the near future, because it takes longer to recover from this treatment, because it causes anovulation and amenorrhea. Anovulation and then amenorrhea. Basically, there's no ovulation or menstrual cycle. So you don't have this. Basically, it takes longer there. So if the patient is planning for pregnancy, that could be an issue. Okay, contraindication. Basically, whatever here is, that's contraindication. It increases the breast cancer risk, but not when it's given estrogen. Okay, and then we have contraception. So what are the contraception? Two types. They're the combination of estrogen and progesterone or continuous progesterone therapy with no estrogen. And they could be given in monophasic, biphasic, and triphasic. Okay, so for this one, I think so I had made a separate video. Let me just see where that is. So if you see, this video, contraceptive table and screen recording. This video explains this table, which is the gonadal hormone inhibitors, like these monophasic combination, biphasic, triphasic, four phases, or what are different contraceptives available for the treatment. So I highly recommend watching that video that I showed in second earlier. That'll help you to really understand how to really how you can go through this table and what you need to remember. Okay, so how they're working. So if you remember what estrogen and progesterone was doing, when there was a possible pregnancy, they were higher and they were shutting down hypothalamus and pituitary release of GnRH and FSH and LH. So this is what exactly it is doing. So this is basically tricking the body, or saying that, oh, it's not like a perfect analogy, but this is basically saying the same thing, that you are exogenously supplying these estrogens and progesterone, and then telling the body, hey, you know what, well, creating a situation which is tricking the body to think there's pregnancy, and then they FSH and LH secretion is reduced. Basically, it suppresses FSH LH secretion, whereas progesterones, they just suppress LH. And it's not like a long-term effect. So if you stop, people resume to the normal menstrual cycle in weeks. So, and then also with progesterone therapy, you also see the thickening of cervical mucus, basically. So it's very difficult for sperms really to pass through this. Okay, so what are the pharmacological effects? The ovary, so following chronic use, it depresses ovarian function. So ovaries become smaller, and breast stimulates breast, and then combination of this estrogen and progesterone suppresses lactation, and after prolonged use, the cervix may show hypertrophy and polyformation. As I told you, thickening of the cervix mucus happens following progesterone therapy. So make sure that you remember which one is increased, which one is decreased. So ovary, it basically depresses the ovarian function. Breast stimulates breast function, suppresses lactation, and then there is an increase or hypertrophy in the uterus or polyformation. So if you remember this, that should be fine. Adverse effects, these are basically self-explanatory. You have to remember the adverse effects, especially the severe ones. If you have a question, if you see a question, which of the following is a severe side effects or adverse effect of hormonal contraception, and you see multiple options, and you see one of these. Oh, that's the answer. Contraindications, basically, this is the same thing as adverse effect. The patient has those things, you don't give to the patient who has already those conditions. And these are the postcoital contraceptives. Basically, what these guys are doing, these guys are preventing, or you can say these are morning after pills. But they need to be given within 72 hours to be effective as 99%. So what they do, they do the same thing as the contraceptions are doing, but these are morning after pills, and these are the names of those. Again, don't need to memorize the dose or the treatment, but as long as you know the drug, that should be fine. Okay, so that is chapter 1. And then 2. Okay. Okay, so in this one we covered anti-estrogens and aromatase inhibitors and progesterone receptor antagonist. Again, make sure that you remember the drug's name, which of the drug belongs to which category. So let's first quickly go on anti-estrogens. So first category is SERM. So as the name tells, selective estrogen response modifiers. That's the full name. And those of you who were in the class during this lecture, they understood it very simple manner. This is the complex diagram is telling a very simple story that different drugs. So this is SERM, this is estradiol, this is natural. This is like your selective modulator for this receptor. What they do, they change the conformation of this receptor in different ways at different tissue, so they have tissue-specific effects. For example, estrogen or estradiol, what was doing, it was agonist in bone, breast, and uterus. So if you give this drug, it can stimulate gene transcription in all these places. But if you give this SERM, this drug is basically gonna do stimulation, especially in bone and uterus, but in breast, it's gonna stop production or no transcription. So you see that estrogen was doing all three, but this particular SERM or another candidate, which is a selective modifier of this receptor, at different places it's doing basically different things. So that's what the selective estrogen response modifiers are. So tamoxifen was the first one, SERM. The way it works, these are selective effects. So you see that what estrogen was doing, it was kind of stimulating everything, but here it's inhibiting the occurrence here, but it is increasing the endometrial thickness, lowering circulating cholesterol, preserving lumbar spine bone density, inhibits secondary primary breast cancer. So what it was doing basically, it was doing all the good things that estrogen was doing, but actually this was kind of negative. It was blocking the cancer, breast cancer risk here. But it was not helpful in this endometrial cancer because it is one of the adverse effects of this drug. So this drug could be used in adjunct therapy for breast cancer, right? So we have another drug which is troramifene, which is exactly similar to tamoxifen. But look at that with this drug, raloxifene. It has good on bone and lipid, so it has these good effects, but actually it blocks. So see that? Does not stimulate endometrium or breast. So it does not do that. It does not do that. So so this is a good treatment, or this could be given as a prophylaxis for breast cancer in women which have high risk factors, especially postmenopausal women. So what the bottom line is that these guys are giving you the good ones without the bad effects. So if you remember that chart, it was here, estrogen therapy with good effects, bad effects. So what this guy is doing basically, it is kind of channeling the good effects only, not the bad effects. So make sure that you remember what are the effects of tamoxifen, how it is different from raloxifene, what are the clinical uses for these guys. Okay. So for example, if you see the difference between this drug and this drug is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The difference is that this drug does not stimulate endometrium in breast cancer, or does not stimulate endometrium in breast, whereas this is very similar to this. It stimulates endometrium. So there's another one is this called fulvestrant. So this drug is an estrogen receptor antagonist. So let's say if you're a patient with this breast cancer, and the patient is basically on this treatment for several years, and now the patient is resistant to that. So what do you get? What do you do this? So this is a drug which is a pure antagonist, receptor antagonist, and this is for patients who are basically resistant to tamoxifen. So let's say that also does not work. We have another line of treatment which is called aromatase inhibitors. So what is aromatase inhibitors? So if you see this guy, if you just blow this up here, this drugs, what these drugs doing, they're just blocking this right here, testosterone to estradiol synthesis. So you know you're blocking the estrogen synthesis. So a selective and non-steroidal inhibitor of aromatase enzyme. So this could be used in treatment of breast tumors which are resistant to tamoxifen. So make sure that you remember what aromatase inhibitors are doing. They're blocking synthesis of testosterone to estradiol. So now there is no more estrogen to bind to the receptor. So this drug is doing it reversibly, but this drug is steroidal molecule. It is irreversibly inhibiting this. So you will basically you will not have this enzyme anymore. So basically no estradiol production, and this is approved for treatment for advanced breast cancer. So the patient has advanced breast cancer, not responsible for any other treatment. This is the treatment for that. So then we have this progesterone receptor antagonist, which is mifepristone. So what the progesterone was doing, remember? Progesterone was actually facilitating pregnancy, right? And then it was helping preparing the uterus for the possible pregnancy and then further implantation. So what this antagonist is going to do, it's going to do exactly opposite. So what this drug is, it's used to terminate early pregnancy through 49 days of gestation. So now you remember that. So once the embryo was there, it was attaching the uterine wall because that's what this progesterone was doing. It was providing that nice nourishing bed there. So if the progesterone is not there, what will happen? The uterine wall is going to soften and opening of cervix. So basically what is happening, the embryo is not capable of attaching to the uterine wall, and that terminates pregnancy. And then you see that super high doses for several days. Make sure that you remember what this drug is going to do, how this is going to do, and then if it is given with prostaglandins, basically increases the efficacy. Okay, then we have clomifan, which is partial agonist that interferes with the negative feedback mechanism of estrogens and increases the secretion of GnRH and so I think so. You saw that earlier. Remember that chart: hypothalamus, pituitary, ovaries, and then when the estrogens and progesterone was higher, it was actually stopping further release. So that is basically the full agonist, right? So this drug is clomifan. It's a partial agonist. So a partial agonist in the presence of a full agonist becomes an antagonist, right? It's going to antagonize that effect. So what it's going to do, it's going to release or partially release that brake. So what will happen then? It will basically increase the stimulation of LH and FSH. So this could be used in ovulation-inducing agent to treat infertility. But the drug is ineffective in women with ovulatory dysfunction due to pituitary and ovarian failure. So if you look at that, I mean, this is again, this is the question that you need to understand the mechanism, how this drug is working, and then you will be able to understand the statement. So how this drug was working, this drug was breaking that, or you can say this, it was easing out that break from estrogens and progesterone to hypothalamus. Remember in the previous figure? But if there is nothing there, this drug is not going to work because this was actually stopping the break, right? If there is no ovulation, it's not going to work. If there is hypothalamic or pituitary failure or dysfunctioning, this drug is not going to work because it is basically facilitating. This drug is basically facilitating the secretion of GnRH and gonadotropins. So if there's something wrong here, this drug is not going to work. Okay, so that was the female gonadal hormone. Then we'll talk about the main male gonadal hormones. These are androgens, and then androgen receptor antagonists and 5-alpha reductase inhibitors. So make sure that you remember all the drugs. So in females we had ovaries, which were main gonadal hormones for female. In male we have testes, which have both gametogenic and endocrine function. And then gametogenic function is controlled by FSH, and the testosterone, which is endocrine function, which is it is controlled by LH stimulation. So make sure that you remember which hormone is doing what in which case. So FSH in female was involved in follicular stimulation in that menstrual cycle, and LH was doing what? It was doing triggering ovulation, right? But here in male, FSH is having gametogenic functions, and LH has the testosterone synthesis from interstitial living cells found in this fish between seminiferous tubules. There's no need to memorize this, but the bottom line is that you have to remember what FSH is doing. FSH is responsible for gametes formation, whereas LH is responsible for testosterone function production. So as in female, the most important estrogen was what? Estradiol. So in humans, the most important androgen is in testes is testosterone. And then the testosterone is converted into dihydrotestosterone by 5-alpha reductase. So, and this is basically the most active form of the testosterone, and this is the enzyme involved in that. So if you see a question, which is the most active form of androgen, dihydrotestosterone. 5-alpha reductase does what? It converts testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, not to this opposite. It converts this to this. And then other androgens, like DHEA, DHEAs, they are also producing significant amount, but they contribute slightly to the maturation process. They have some other development function. Make sure that you remember all these effects of testosterone in different organs. Basically, in addition to the androgenic effects like male sexual growth, it also has all the other effects like brain for libido, muscle increased muscle strength, bone marrow stimulation of stem cell, production of certain proteins, and hair growth. So you see that it's not just like a male gonadal hormone; it has multiple other effects too. And in addition to males, it also has some effects in females, although to the very lesser extent. So in males, it kind of is responsible for development of secondary sex features, and in large doses, this testosterone or its derivative, they suppress secretion of gonadotropins. How? Remember the negative feedback. So in higher doses, they block secretion of gonadotropins. And in females, they do the exactly same thing, like the growth of facial hair, deepening of voice, and enlargement of clitoris, frontal baldness, and prominent musculature, but to the very lesser extent compared to the males. Okay, and then what are the clinical uses? So it makes makes perfect sense. If the patient has hypogonadal situation. And then, so these could be used as hormone replacement therapy. And then these are the drugs. I think so. We just saw earlier in this slide or in this lecture. Don't need to memorize the route or doses, but make sure that you remember the clinical uses. Again, these are same self-explanatory. Adverse effects, so make sure that you understand that. So these are situations when you need androgenic stimulation. So whatever we spoke about is you need androgenic stimulation in case you had hypogonadism case or hypopituitarism in male or certain other clinical uses. But let's say if you have excess of that, how do you do that? So you want to suppress the androgenic function. So you see these from top to bottom. So this is hypothalamus, This is pituitary, testes. This is just production of testosterone and then active form, and then it's binding the receptor and activating the gene transcription. Um, so you can affect in multiple places. So you can block with GnRH antagonist. It's going to just block this for the first step. You can actually have low and pulsatile manner that will stimulate, but if you give chronic, it can actually, this chronic continuous administration will not block that. You can completely remove the you can completely remove the testes, all right? Or you can have these drugs called the 5-alpha reductase inhibitors, right? This drug is called as finasteride. So it's going to block this enzyme. So what this enzyme was doing, it was converting the testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, which is the most active form of testosterone, right? So if you don't have the most active, it's not going to bind. And then we have finally androgen receptor antagonists. So these receptor antagonists, they're just going to block the receptor and it block further activity. So you see that there are multiple ways you can stop or block the androgenic stimulation in case if this is an excess, or if there is a condition, clinical situation in which there is hyperactivity of this axis. So let's talk about the 5-alpha reductase inhibitors. So these are the drugs. Make sure that you remember the drug and what are they are used for. We just saw that these drugs, they block this enzyme which converts testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, which is the most active form of the testosterone or androgen. And then we have another drugs called antagonists at receptors. So with these guys, they are competitive antagonists at androgen receptor. So if you see that, so if you don't have receptor available for endogenous dihydrotestosterone to bind, it's not gonna activate the receptor, or you will not see any other further effect. So you can, antagonist is sitting here, it blocks this further gene transcription. Okay, so make sure that you remember what are these used for. It could be used for prostatic carcinoma because it's an antagonist, and then this compound can also be used in women to treat hirsutism, and in men to decrease excessive sexual drive. So remember, in females, although up to the lesser extent, these drugs, these androgens, they can increase the facial hair growth. So in that situation, the antagonist could actually treat hirsutism in females. And then we have this drug called danazol, which binds weakly to these all progesterone, androgenic, and glucocorticoid receptors, and then actually inhibit the release of FSH, LHA, and steroid biosynthesis, inhibit endometrial growth. So it's basically complete shutdown of that pathway, gonadotropin and corticosteroid pathway. So as you can see that it inhibits endometrial growth, so it could be used for treatment of endometriosis. So that kind of covers these both chapters. And I wish you guys all the best. So these are the last videos for this semester. I'll see you guys in MCP3 next semester. And the goal this time is about 98%. So I hope these videos are really helping you guys and you are able to achieve your goals, learning goals. So if you feel that you're being helped, I would appreciate if you can finish your online evaluation for me as an instructor. That will really help me down the road. Right now it is around 10 to 15% response rate. I would appreciate if everybody who can do this online evaluation, yeah, I would really appreciate it. That would really help me. Thank you.